Imagine walking through the misty woodlands, the wind whispering through the trees, when suddenly you hear it. A faint giggle, a rustle, something lurking just beyond your sight. Is it a trick of your mind, or have you wandered into the domain of a boggart? These mischievous, malevolent creatures have haunted England's countryside for centuries. But what are they really? And why do they love to torment those who dare to cross their path? Join me as we delve into the story of the Boggart of Rittenstone Lane. But first, what is a boggart? Boggarts are mysterious creatures, deeply woven into the folklore of northern England, especially in Lancashire. But what are they exactly? Well, that really depends on who you ask. Some say boggarts are mischievous spirits, pranksters that thrive on creating absolute chaos, moving objects, spoiling food, and generally making life difficult for anyone unlucky enough to cross their path. But then others claim they're much darker, wicked beings capable of bringing misfortune and even physical harm to people. But what makes boggarts especially fascinating is how deeply they're tied into Lancashire's past. In a time when the line between superstition and reality was thin, many believed that these creatures haunted the countryside, hiding in dark corners and old homes and even in stones. Just like our boggart today, the Boggart of Rittenstone Lane in Longridge. Local villages would share stories of strange happenings, and boggarts became a way to explain the unexplainable. And they were blamed for everything from bad harvests to illness to eerie sounds in the night and even people's deaths. Lancashire is filled with tales of these mysterious creatures, but one of the most intriguing and perhaps unsettling centres on a particular place, Rittenstone Lane in Longridge. Down a small winding lane there's a stone that locals have feared for generations. They say it's more than just a rock, it's a marker for something far more sinister. This is the Boggart Stone, a place where a mischievous spirit is said to lurk, causing chaos for those brave enough to get too close. But what is the truth behind this legend? Unlike other legends, this isn't just a story passed down through whispers. The stone is real and is said to be cursed by the spirit of a boggart. Carved with a chilling inscription that reads, "Rafe Radcliffe laid this stone to lie forever, AD 1655, has left locals wary for hundreds of years." But what's the story behind it? How did this ancient stone become the resting place or prison of such a powerful force? Well, let's dive into the mystery of the Boggart Stone and uncover the legend. The year is 1655, 20 years after the last witch trial in Lancashire, and superstition is still rife in local people's minds. Puritans were in power, especially in Lancashire, and the north of the country was really poor compared to the south. And many people's daily lives were just a battle to survive, fighting against bad harvests, civil war, famine, and disease. So around this time, the Radcliffe family of Longridge experienced a series of rapid tragic deaths, which may have contributed to the local legends surrounding this stone. According to parish records, at least 4 family members died between 1654 and 1655. And this was a devastating period for the Radcliffe family. The string of deaths and heightened superstitions of the time led Rafe Radcliffe, the head of the family, to quickly blame an evil boggart for the family's misfortune, because the blame had to be laid somewhere. And it wasn't just the Radcliffe family that suffered at the hands of this boggart. Travellers down the old windy lane, which was part of an old Roman highway from Ribchester to Lancaster, often reported strange things happening to them, such as their cloaks were pulled, but there was nobody there, feelings of being pinched when they went down the lane, hearing shrieks in the dark and loud unexplained bangs, and their horses becoming spooked. Until Rafe finally decided he had had enough and something must be done. So he called in the local priest, who conducted an exorcism in the haunted lane and at a nearby farm, and they decided to bury the evil boggart under the stone at the end of the lane, where the spirit would be trapped. Now, given the superstitions of the time, the stone was inscribed with the words, "To lie forever," which was possibly a bid to try and control or appease whatever force it was that was haunting the family. Now, all was quiet for a time after that, and the Radcliffes and travellers passing down the lane were pretty much left in peace. But legend has it that the Boggart grew restless beneath the stone, and he started to find new ways to torment those who dared to pass by. One evening, a doctor reported riding along Writton Stone Lane on horseback, and as he passed the stone, his horse shied up violently, and then it bolted, galloping uncontrollably despite the doctor's tight grip on the reins. And when he finally managed to rein in the horse and dismount, he checked his horse only to find that the horse's coat was drenched in blood, but with no evidence of how it got there. But one encounter with the Boggart was not enough for this doctor, and later, while drinking at a local pub, he bragged that he feared no spirit lurking at the bottom of the lane, and he vowed to ride back to that stone that very night to prove it. But when he returned to the pub, he was a changed man, pale and trembling, unable to speak of what had happened for some time. Only after more drinks did he manage to whisper his tale. As he neared the stone, he claimed a shapeless mass appeared in the darkness, dragging him from his saddle. The creature wrapped around him, crushing him so tight that he felt like he was choking, and he reported that he barely escaped with his life. Some years later, a new farmer took over a nearby dairy farm, and he came across the stone, and he thought it would make the perfect addition to his buttery. Perhaps he'd heard the local tales of Boggarts and mischief, but he decided that his need for a strong, sturdy stone for his dairy outweighed any old superstitions, and determined he set about to put that stone to good use. So when the farmer went to move the stone, he brought several men and 6 strong horses, expecting it to be a nice, easy trot downhill back to his farm. But the stone had other ideas. The horses strained as if under some terrible weight, and with every hoof step forward they took, they slid 3 steps back. For hours the struggle continued, yet the stone barely budged any closer to the dairy. By the time the exhausted horses finally dragged the stone to the farm, they were broken, and the men reported crushed fingers and bruised toes from the ordeal. But that wasn't the end of it. Once the stone was laid as part of the buttery, the farmer's troubles really began. Though the stone was perfectly flat, anything that was placed on it seemed to tip or tilt or fall, often smashing on the floor. Beloved pieces of farmhouse pottery that had been passed down for generations were found shattered around the stone, as if thrown by some unseen hand, and the clattering and breaking of pottery could often be heard all night long. And other stories soon followed, of the milk turning to blood when it was sat on the stone, and of a poor maid who fell in and died soon after working near it. At last the farmer had had enough, and despite the stone's prominent place in the buttery, it was clear it would never be at home here. The farmer declared that the stone was cursed with a boggart, and it must be returned to its original place on the lane. And then he muttered to himself, "An happent Boggart'll go back with it." In desperation he gathered his men again, and he harnessed 6 more horses, and he prepared for the gruelling task of dragging that stone back up the steep hill. But to his amazement, the horses seemed unbothered. This time the stone's weight seemed like nothing, and the horses trotted briskly up the hill. It was just like the stone itself was eager to get back to its home. Once the stone was returned to his resting spot, the farmer planted a holly bush beside it. It's a traditional plant thought to ward against evil, and he did that to ensure the boggart would remain bound to that stone, and then his farm would hopefully, once again, find peace. The stone remains untouched to this day, still protected by the holly bush, and the inscription, despite being over 300 years old, is still just as easily readable as it was the day it was laid. The stone is left alone by those who know its tale, maybe believing that it's best to just let sleeping boggarts lie. Perhaps the stone itself has roots in something far older than local tales. A reminder of a time when our ancestors revered such stones as markers of protection or portals to the other world or the unseen. But whatever the truth may be, the Boggart stone continues to defy those who attempt to disturb it, as if it holds secrets for those willing to wonder, or perhaps those daring enough to believe. So what do you think? I'd love to hear if you believe there's truth behind the legend, or if the Boggart stone's mystery will forever remain unsolved.